Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Jeff.
How are you today?
Pretty good, actually. The last 2 days have been in pretty chipper mood. Uh,
Yeah?
yeah, and I've been pretty happy about that by definition. Yeah, no, it's been good. I had 2 weeks of like some real emotional ups and downs with current events and things, and finally got that a little under control and a little taped and back on track and talking with you here today about this stuff. And I'm actually really excited about this live stream today.
Yeah, me too. I will start out by saying that I wanted to publicly thank you for
Oh,
all the work that you've done. As we were discussing offline, you have been an integral part to breaking down Scientology for myself, and I know for probably thousands of other people. Your approach to uh, the details and with a non-emotional aspect to it and just laying out the facts, super helpful for my recovery. So thank you.
you're welcome.
I love watching your stuff, and even when I was watching it in secret when my wife didn't know, it was almost like having an affair.
Well, awesome.
Yeah.
The feeling is mutual, Jeff. I have actually very much enjoyed checking out some of your stuff. I thought the animated stuff was awesome. You shared with me last week. I thought that was great. Actually, giving me ideas because I've been trying to, think about bringing in some animation and stuff, and I didn't realize I could do it so easily through PowerPoint. So I'm a little excited about some of that actually for future content. But I'm really excited these days about the multiplicity of voices and the fact that it's actually become kind of a thing for ex-members to step up and get in front of a camera. Because when I first started doing this, that wasn't the situation. And it's a different world now with this. And this is what we always wanted, is more of us coming up, speaking up, and telling our truths and speaking about the experience of Scientology and experience being in a cult. So I'm actually like really happy these days about the state of things in regards to Scientology criticism and discussions about it.
It is phenomenal how many channels are out there now. I think there's 50 like
Wow,
active
is it
channels.
really 50 now?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Wow.
certainly more than 40, but there's new ones coming out every day, and I think the best thing about it is back in the day when it was just you and a few other people,
Yeah.
it was a very limited, I'm gonna say like approach to doing it, and it
Mm,
was if someone didn't get along with the personality, then it wouldn't really catch on and they wouldn't keep watching.
mhm.
But because there's people that, from Canada, like myself, the States, Apostate Alex, who is in the chat here watching us right now,
Oh,
in the
cool.
UK.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah, he's lovely. He is a lovely man. Very handsome too, I must say. And yeah, it's just, and I know people who are preparing to speak out actually from different countries. And it's a good day to be a non-Scientologist or a former Scientologist.
Yeah.
And it's quite exciting. So I'm very happy as well. And on the note of your channel, just in the very small chance that somebody is not subscribed to you already, please do make sure you check out Chris Shelton's channel. Um, you can find anything you're looking for in Scientology on your channel.
There's a
It's
lot there.
quite diverse. So, and you've
Yeah.
been doing this. We were talking about it. We were doing this. You were doing this in 9 years ago. So next year is your 10-year anniversary of speaking out against the cult of Scientology, which is awesome.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. It's been a wild decade. I will definitely say that. 10 years out this year and 10 years speaking out next year. And boy, it's the kind of thing that your life is just never really the same after that, especially when you make it your thing. Like, this is what I do now. And
Yeah.
it's wonderful. I just couldn't think of anything better to do with myself.
No.
So,
And you know what? There's probably nothing more valuable that you could do. I
no.
think, like, for myself anyway, I can only speak for myself, but having spent so many years in Scientology, keeping people in and getting people in, now my goal and my purpose in life is to ensure that nobody else joins. And if I can get somebody else out, then I will be happy.
Yeah.
That's my goal. So,
Me too. And I'm
however,
pretty sure that with what you're doing, you are going to help people getting out. Because it's one of those things where it's very, very difficult. You know, it's so funny. We're so stat oriented, right? And numbers oriented. And to this day, I still look at my numbers, right? I can't not do that, but I don't graph them. But it's funny how we kind of, you know, we're talking about recovery today, and one of those things that, you know, has been very slow to get over is, you know, is the numbers define me and, you know, and determine my value as a human being, right?
yeah,
And it's been a slow process getting past that. But it's hard. What I was going to say is it's hard to gauge our success at this because we only hear from some of the people that we help.
yeah,
And this is not an ask to flood me with emails right now. I'm just saying that that's the case over time. You only hear about a few, you know, who reach out to you. And it took a lot of that before, you know, years of it, before I was finally starting to accept the idea that maybe it's possibly true that I'm actually helping people, right? But it is. Now we know. Now we know that's the case. And I think that's one of the reasons for the growth of the community.
yeah, absolutely. And like and again, for myself, I was watching you for years before I reached out to you and said hello or anything like that.
Right.
So there are people out there watching, and there are people in the bubble. There are people who just want to be educated into what is truly going on in their life. And to all of you, I say welcome. I am always around to chat. I know of a few other creators as well who are willing to just get reached out to and have a discussion and see if we can help you. So
Exactly.
anyway, enough of this chit chat. Let's get
Yes.
down to brass tacks, sir.
Yes. Let's do it.
So my main focus for myself and my channel, of course, is going to be about recovery, mental health, and different other options.
Yeah.
You played a big role in my recovery, and in your book, Scientology A to Xenu, you were mentioning that there is a bunch of points of recovery, which
Yeah.
I think would be very valuable for us to go over. In my opinion, education is the most valuable and permanent aspect to recovery. Would you?
Yes.
What would you say are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I agree completely. And I think you are definitely taking a page from my from my book on that. I could not stress education enough. In fact, even when I first got started, I didn't really stress it enough. I don't know, but I certainly have since. And there's no substitute for experience. That's true. Living through a thing, experiencing a thing is the way it becomes the most real to you, right? Because you actually live it. But short of that, or having lived through something and then trying to get over it or get past it, there's no way to do that if you don't understand the experience. And it's one thing to live it, it's another thing to bring understanding to what that experience was and is, and what it could be, you know, what it means to you in moving into the future. And I just don't know any other way to accomplish that except through education.
Yeah, I would agree. So, as someone is leaving Scientology, what would you say would be the first thing that they should do, either to break their current thinking or just make it okay for themselves to look?
Okay. Um, so this might even be sort of pre-leaving officially or physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, well, obviously, I think the first thing is gathering information, right? Finding
Yeah.
out more. And it's always in bits and pieces, and it's always, you know, in fits and starts, and it's always sort of slow at the beginning, right? Because you're still in this other headspace. And that headspace says that anything that isn't this is wrong and interpolating and bad and, you know, and reactive and aberrated and all of that, all these words they use, right? This language, which I'm definitely going to talk about today. Yeah, and that's what you're trying to start getting past. So once a person's actually looking, that's the golden place. That's wonderful, because once they start looking, they're more receptive to receiving, as opposed to the people who are walled off. And I think the things that people need to find at that stage, if we look at it through that whole onion layer thing from, from years ago, is things they can accept, things that are not going to necessarily affect their core beliefs, but are going to start breaking down the external stuff, and that's going to be kind of individual for people. So it's a little hard to say, but generally it tends to go in the direction of, if I remember right, criticism of management, criticism of not Hubbard, not the tech, but other things. Was that how it was for you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Scientology, if you said anything about L. Ron Hubbard or the tech or anything like that, I just instantly wall.
Yep.
Um, I just looked at you like you're a crackpot, and you didn't know what you're talking about, or you've been reading stuff that has been on the internet or whatever, and you're repeating black propaganda, and black PR and stuff like that.
That's right. That's right.
So, however, like I think I was discussing this yesterday with Gabrielle, who has her own channel as well,
Mhm.
Escaping the Cultiverse. She's in the chat here. When I was leaving Scientology and questioning it, the thing that really spoke out to me was the Ideal Org program and the constant regging,
Right.
where there was zero focus on auditing or training. And
Yep.
I was always a training guy. Like I loved training.
Me
I
too.
hated auditing.
Yeah.
I
Oh, really?
absolutely
You hated it?
despised it. I hated
Oh,
it.
okay.
I didn't like it because I always ended up just getting sec checks or getting my rudes flown. And for anyone
Right.
who doesn't know what that is, what with me anyway, it boiled down to, do you have a withhold?
Right.
And
That's right.
rudes are just like the things that you have to handle before a session can happen. And
Mhm.
one of them is if you're withholding something from the auditor, then you can't then look into your mind. You're kind of stuck on that, so you have to get off your withhold.
That's right.
Um, but most of my auditing ended up being like that, and so it just wasn't enjoyable.
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting. And that there's a whole thing I won't go on a roll on right now because we're talking about the recovery side, but that really does kind of speak a little bit to my idea that the auditing is really like the core thing that keeps you there and keeps you going. And if it's a bad experience for you, then I guess training would become that thing. And if that becomes bad, then then it's just a social cultural thing, I guess, that keeps you there. Family ties, that kind of thing, I guess.
yeah.
But the auditing is really where it's at. And it's interesting that you only got the blunt end of the auditing stick, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, so as now that I think about it, so I was kind of forced to do the Purif. I didn't really want to do it. The
Mm.
Purification Rundown, which is the sweat out program in Scientology. Um, and then directly after that, I had to do the TRs and objectives, which is essentially where someone is repeatedly making you touch walls and pick this up, put that down, like do things and walk around. And I didn't like it. And it was like
People hate the objectives.
it was so constant and so repetitive, and I hated it. Like I
Yes.
did not like doing it. And
Yes.
then it had come out that I had smoked a joint when I was young.
Oh,
I reverted to drugs, is what it's appropriately called, because I was already in Scientology, and that because I smoked a joint on one weekend, then I had to do the drug rundown. And that was literally the only drug I had taken. Like I didn't even take Tylenol or anything. And that
right.
was like super dragged out. And that was my last auditing session on an actual bridge step, was when I was like, I don't know, 17.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. So they,
And
yeah, they definitely didn't hook you with the mainline hardcore drug. They kept you on board, stringing you along with the lesser stuff.
yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
So if in future not auditing, I've been on the meter, but it's always been sec checks or um, meter checks when I was on staff, which is where they check to see if you've been naughty over the weekend by sticking you on a meter as you arrive for post. And yeah, so I was just never kind of into it. The training though, I loved it. And when I was the bookstore officer uh, in 2008, I think it was, whenever the Golden Age of Knowledge came out, that was my jam. I loved it. I really
Yeah.
liked it.
Nice.
And I liked educating people on the lectures and so forth. So
I was in a very similar place for periods of time as a staff member and Sea Org member. I did a lot of auditing. I actually really dug auditing for a long time as a public and as a staff member. And that's when I went up to clear, was as a staff member. But as a Sea Org member, I didn't make any bridge progress at all. 17 years of nothing. And in fact, all of the previous progress I'd made, the day I left Scientology, the day I routed out and left the base, I was at the same place on the bridge the day I walked in. I needed to redo a PURIF objectives, go back to the beginning, right? Kind of thing, because we found problems at every level, which they were doing with everybody. I wasn't anybody special that way. And it just struck me as so ironic, right? That 27 years of dedicated work and service and blood, sweat, and tears. And I was at the exact same place the day I walked out that I was when I walked in. And I just thought there's got to be a message there. Because I had over, I'll throw a ring. I mean, this is a guesstimate. I know I had 1,000 hours of RPF auditing.
Oh, wow.
That was just sec checking, FPRD, case review of some, but mostly FPRD and withhold pulling, sec checking, right? But that's the RPF. Outside of that, I think I had the same number of folders. So I probably had about 1,500 to 2,000 hours of auditing total in Scientology. That sounds right-ish to me over all the years. And auditing was alternately like my savior, my thing. I needed it, right? The thing you really, really want. And then it became kind of a punishment. And then, in the Sea Org, it was nothing but punishment and sort of a carrot. Like at one point I was going to become an OT auditor. They were going to give me my bridge and I was finally going to get up the bridge. And then stuff came up and I went to the RPF instead. So blah, blah, blah. But I guess we got onto this from talking about education and the fact that I was when I hear what you were saying there, I was just thinking I was the same way with education while I was in Scientology, because while I was kind of into the auditing, I was really, really into reading and listening to Hubbard's works. Read all the books. I think I've read all the books. I definitely went through full tech volumes, the red volumes, right? I read all of, like whole chunks of them, tons and tons of bulletins, and tons and tons and tons of lectures. I either listened to them or went through the transcripts, all because I was trying to figure out OT3. I actually was. I was stuck to it from day one. And we're not necessarily like, it's funny how we got into this, because I haven't talked about this a lot, but I was stuck to it. Like they played me RJ67 early on, right? The lecture where Hubbard announces OT3. And he doesn't tell you what's on it. He doesn't tell you what's in it. He just says it's a big galactic, devastating event, this tragedy that happens, right? And this sector of the universe has been a desert ever since. And you're like, visions of Star Wars and Death Stars and all kinds of crazy things are going through your head. What could it be? What could it be? What could it be? And I just personally, I found out in the last 10 years, mysteries aren't my thing. I'm the guy who skips to the end of the book, right? I got to know, right? And so I couldn't find out. Nobody would tell me. And having grown up in a Scientology household, my parents are OTs, and my dad just, drops these little teasers every now and again while I'm growing up. There's implant stations on Mars, You
Yeah.
know, one time I look at him and I go, Dad, the center of the universe, there's all these stars, all this stuff. There must be a lot of stuff going on there. And he kind of looks at me with this little smile. I hate him that he did this, right? He looks at me with this little smile and he goes, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on there, right? And it was just like, oh, fuck you, you know, like he wouldn't tell me anything. And I wanted him to so bad. So in a way, I was stuck to OT3 even before I got on Scientology lines, right?
Mm.
And anyway, I don't mean to go on to a big thing about this. I think we're going to talk about recovery, but education was always my thing in Scientology. I figured if I knew and I understood all the things Hubbard had to say, that it would all come together into this coherent whole, and it never did.
Yeah.
You know? And after a couple of decades of that, you start realizing maybe it's not me, maybe it's him. You
know? So while we're still talking about you and your experience there in the Sea Org, one of your viewers there does have a super chat. How did you explain to yourself as a clear that you weren't able to remember absolutely everything in your life?
That's a good question. And since it's coming up, because I had, and I don't, you'll have to tell me if this was true, if this is what you did. Mm-hmm. But the way I sorted out the cognitive dissonance of what Dianetics said about clears and what the reality of our Scientology existence was, which was I knew clears, my parents were clears. None of these people had eidetic recall. None of these people were immune to getting sick. None of these people had any of the things that Hubbard talks about and describes clear as. So how does this make any sense? And to me, it made sense because I told myself, one, Hubbard was actually describing OT. And two, people are a lot more fucked up, so to speak, than they think or than any of us want to necessarily acknowledge. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that, you know, like Hubbard was learning as he was going too, right? So maybe he was over-promising and under-delivering, as we saw and heard in the lectures. It was kind of undeniable that he kept doing that. So maybe he just misestimated the amount of work it was going to take to produce that result. And so he was making all these gains and steps and evolving the subject through the 1950s and 60s. And then he hit on, okay, well, here's the plateau, which we will call clear, which is not really that, but it is this really amazing place to be. And it'll be your stepping stone onto the OT levels where you will accomplish all of those things. And I know that doesn't really make sense. I know that everything I just said doesn't really fit with what it says in the materials, but those were the convolutions I went through to make it make sense. How about you?
Well, you know, it's funny because when we're talking about Dianetics and so forth, my dad was clear. He went clear in the 70s, I think.
Yeah, my dad too.
Yeah. So I observed so many things that did not line up with what a clear was supposed to be. You know, he would get sick, not all the time, but he would get sick. And you're not supposed to be able to get sick if you're clear. Right. You have to remember everything. And he would rewatch the same episode of Murder, She Wrote a million times. And there's no way that he didn't remember, like he didn't remember what happened. And so, you know, there was, I guess to use Scientology terminology, there were outpoints. Yeah. And I've always been interested in outpoints and being able to spot them and like pulling strings always interested me. Right. And so, but then if you ever discussed it with him, or if he was ever had to go for any kind of review auditing about his clear status, you know, do his clear certainty rundown and so forth, he would always get very defensive and angry about it. Like he's being invalidated. And I always just kind of thought that's not how a clear would act. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And anyway, clearly he wasn't clear, but I would also, when we're talking about further up OT levels. Sorry,
Mhm.
go ahead.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just had a
Okay.
thought. I didn't want to forget. I'm going to note it
Okay.
down.
Write it down. I'll keep talking. So I would witness OT levels, or people who have done the OT levels, and I would actually like send thoughts to them. Like I would try and get their attention by like flowing to them.
Yes.
And they never picked it up. And so then I was thinking, oh, well, maybe I'm just not powerful enough. Maybe I'm
Yes.
so low on the tone scale that I can't, like, they can't even pick me up.
Yep. Yep.
And I remember always wondering, like, can Hillary Rockel, who was an OT8, really knock someone's hat off from across the room, right? And all these things I just explained away by, well, I guess I'm just not uh, open enough in my mind, in my spirit, whatever, to actually observe these things, or whatever. I wasn't good enough. It was always me.
Right.
So
Exactly.
that was kind of my experience with it.
It's really funny that we're talking about this, because once you start having the back and forth, all these other things start coming to mind as the other mechanisms in Scientology, or the other things Hubbard offers to address this exact thing. Mm-hmm. Why is it that clear isn't clear, right? Yep. And there were a couple other things.
Hit me with them.
Okay, number one, ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Out ethics will destroy case gain. Out ethics will negate your powers and abilities. Mm-hmm. So if you, even OTs can go out ethics. Mm-hmm. And this was my reasoning all the way up to, because I saw a lot of out ethics OTs, right? I mean, I'm a Sea Org member going around from org to org and seeing all the crap these guys get up to in their day to day. And I'm like, what the hell, right? So ethics, and I would be told by advanced course supervisors, OT supervisors, or OTK supervisors, when I worked at AOLA and other places, they would tell me, well, they go out ethics. And if you go out ethics, you lose all your power, right? You lose your abilities because you're being out ethics. You deny yourself and you cut yourself off. Mm-hmm. And that's why they don't have that, right? And so ethics was always an answer for me too. And there was a bulletin called Suppressives and Hidden Standards. Remember that one?
I do. I haven't thought about it since I read it, but yeah.
Right? but it comes to mind, right? You go, oh, right, I'm not supposed to have, like when you said, well, my dad couldn't blah, and I thought clear's blah, so therefore, well, that would be your hidden standard, see? Yeah. And it's only suppressives who are going to lay those down. Not that you're suppressive, see, but you're acting in that direction if you start laying down hidden standards. So just don't do that, right? And then you immediately cut yourself off from doing that. And then finally, the last one was a couple places in lectures where Hubbard would caution people. You'd say straight up, yeah, you can knock their hat off at 50 feet, and you can throw lightning bolts around, you can do this and that, but don't do it, because you'll freak everybody out. They're not ready for it yet, right? Remember, these were early lectures, and he would talk about this stuff. And he'd say, yeah, don't show off. Don't be doing this stuff. You're just going to freak everybody out. And what you're actually going to do, if you keep on persisting with that behavior, is you're going to blow people's minds so hard that you're going to make them afraid, and they're going to reinvent or bring back the technology that traps and imperils and implants Satans. So don't do that, right? You're just going to scare them. And so tell the lesser tale, as Hubbard would say, right? Remember that?
Yeah, and an acceptable truth, or just like...
That's right.
Yeah, it's really quite phenomenal how much is there to stop you from communicating stuff you don't see.
That's right.
That's right. Anyway,
I
Fabian, thank you for the question. That went on.
We've come up with 5 or 6 things to cognitive dissonance your way through this stuff. Yeah, it's all built into Scientology.
Yeah, and it is. It's constant. Like if you sat down and tried to find them all, you'd be there forever.
Exactly.
Cool. So that was a good tangent for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your book here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we were talking about how the value of education.
Yeah. Let's go back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, education's real important. And I guess the value of talking about, like, when people are still in, you don't want to hit them with the heavy stuff, and you don't want to come in all big guns on how evil Miscavige and Hubbard and all that are. You want to hit the soft points, right? The things they can agree on. And almost every single Scientologist agrees that they are over-edged, that they're asked for too much money too often. Everybody in Scientology thinks that, at least every single person I ever talked to.
Yep.
And this was a common public problem. And I would run into this when I was recovering people. So I'd be out knocking on doors going, hey, it's been 3 years since you came into the org. I'm the Sea Org missionaire out here to recover you. What's up? And sometimes they would open up, or I could get them to open up. And it was routinely over-regging, over-promising and under-delivering, or just straight ripping them off, right? People were just trying to take money from them, not give them anything. Yeah. So I would, oh, we're so sorry. That's not standard. Don't do that. We'll totally fix it and bring you back. But I think what people are willing to hear at the beginning of their journey out is the over-regging, the ethics, right? The overuse of ethics, or, in some cases, people have experienced injustices. It's funny how everybody was looking forward. The thing that everybody was looking forward to on Superpower back in the day, before all the perception machines showed up, the earlier thing that everybody was really pumped for Superpower was the ethics repair list.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's another thing that we hardly ever talk about with Superpower, because everybody's so, into the machines. But there's an ethics repair list, which is supposed to deal with all the bullshit ethics that you've ever had on all four flows, right? As they say. So I think
is that similar to the repair past ethics?
This is not, no, it's different. It would be a different technical procedure, because you're doing an audited repair list versus an ethics two-way comm action outside a session.
Okay.
It would be different. But it's like a repair list, right? Have you been, accused of an overt you didn't commit? I'm just making up questions off the list, but, sure, stuff like that. And I remember watching event audiences being briefed on this. The Scientology term is line charging, right? When they get told about this, they just laugh hysterically, because there's so much pent-up trauma connected with this subject. And ethics is one of those subjects in Scientology. It was so noticeable. Even as a Scientologist, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of people who've been fucked with in ethics. And that's a point that will get to people if you're talking to them, or they're thinking about what's wrong with Scientology. You can talk about misapplications or bad applications, or, times that things were done that they didn't like or didn't want to experience. And then all you have to do, but, what you would do to build on that would be to then show them that actually what was done to them is exactly what Hubbard said to do to them.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a bad apple. It wasn't an accident. That's purposeful. Then they can start connecting those dots. But usually it starts with a sort of a, I don't feel good about what happened to me here sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's, so I never did any recovery actions like that where I'd go to people's houses. But if I think back on my experience, if you were to show up to my house and try to recover me, that's probably something I would say. It's like, stop asking for all my money.
Right. Exactly. And I would come at them all doe-eyed and fresh-faced, right? And be like, they did what? They said what? That's crazy. That's not what policy says to do. That's just wrong. You were misserviced. You were mishandled, and they would love it, because, I would be validating their rightness, and then bring them back in and do it to them again. That was the awful.
Oh, not again.
Right. And I would actually get, I can't put myself up as like the savior when I was a Scientologist. I was an asshole just like everybody else. I can't say I wasn't.
Yeah.
But I really did feel for these people, and I really did want to get them back. And so when the same shit would happen to them again, I would just get pissed off. And it sometimes as a Sea Org member, I got the clout to go in and rip some people's faces off if they were messing with my recovery, But those would be the only times that we really showed care towards those people. It's when I was trying to get them back. Once we had them in, it was like, okay, here we go, cycle of abuse again.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
It really is.
Alex is saying you were mishandled, or that was an injustice, but never sorry.
Yeah, I would say sorry, but it's a good point, Alex. It's a very good point, because one thing that became abundantly clear to me in the couple of years that I was doing that work is how the church would go out of its way to never say sorry. And I was disaffected enough at that point, post RPF, that I could see the problem there, and I would say that, but that's the only reason I could get people back. I think a lot of people who do recovery work fuck it all up because they come at it from the church is right and you are wrong point of view. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So those are my thoughts on people who are still in.
100%. And so what would be the next, you said you had about 9 points there on your book?
Yeah, let's go over some of them. So I was looking at, okay, so if somebody comes out of Scientology or some other cult, and I was just looking at these today, and I thought, yeah, these are good points. Let's go over them. Find a soft place to land, a place where you can be away from Scientology and get the support, help, and love you need to get on with your life. This was the first point, is I thought, even if they're not disconnecting from you through the whole disconnection shunning bullshit, if you're out, you really should go all the way out. Don't try to maintain, I know some people who are, sort of mentally out, physically in, still need to maintain communication, all that. Every single case is different. I totally get that. Yeah. But if circumstances don't demand that you stay connected with Scientology or Scientologists, it really is best to do a full break and get all the way away. Because those cut ties will help speed up the recovery process. Right now, you can actually get on with the next phase of your life, so to speak. And if that's not possible, it's understandable.
And if you don't physically remove yourself from the abusive environment, they'll just keep sucking you back in. That's what happened to me.
That's right.
Right? I left Scientology 4 times, I think, in my entire career, floated away. But because I was connected with family who was still in, I never truly left. And so, you get calls every now and then, or a Scientologist happens to come over to the house and talk to you, and they start planting these little seeds into your garden again, and eventually they get you again. And you end up, okay, I'll do an extension course, whatever, just to shut them up, which is what happened with me. And all of a sudden you're back in. So as difficult as it is, the clean break, if possible, if that's workable in your situation, is always best.
That's right. And yes, Holly, I do mean if you can skip the routing out, just do it. I routed out because I needed to maintain good standing with the church, because I was establishing a relationship with a woman who was still in the church, and I didn't want to ruin that and screw that whole thing up. And that was my circumstance. And 2013 was an exercise in futility in trying to reach her and get her out while I was still pretending to be in and play along. And that whole thing was a bit of a disaster, because the cards are all stacked in Scientology's favor. If you're trying to play hide and seek with OSA, eventually they're going to get you, because they don't have anything else to do all day but find you. You have other things to do with your life. You're not a professional anti-counterintelligence person. So that's kind of the flow of what I'm sort of referring to when I'm kind of, like I said here, if you're still in touch with Scientologists who are trying to handle you to get back in the cult, I don't think your recovery is going to go very smoothly, because they're constantly trying to pull you back in.
Totally.
And there are ties there. There's an important psychological factor there, right? If you still feel obligated or pulled back in that direction through social ties or whatever, you can't let go of some of the thinking and the thinking patterns. And that's where the recovery's at, is letting that stuff go.
Yep.
So, then number 2 would be take the time to learn about the lies and deceptions foisted off on you by L. Ron Hubbard, David Miscavige, and the Scientology staff, right? Which is sort of the whole, let's find out all the bullshit now. Right? Which people usually don't need much encouragement. People are usually electrified to find out how much they've been lied to.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, because this is something that's come up with in discussions with my wife and actually on chats and stuff. When you heard about all the things that was truly happening in Scientology, what was your reaction? Like, how were you mad? Were you embarrassed? Were you like, were you indifferent? Like, what would you say is what was your emotional reaction?
When I found out what Scientology was up to?
Yeah. When you really
I
found out that truth.
I was very upset. I was very, very angry. I was very angry. Injustice bothers me a lot. I've always had a bit of a thing about that, right? And deception and lies and deceit are especially premeditated, figuring out, like a con job, a confidence job, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing just really pisses me off. I hate seeing people being taken advantage of. And so to find out, well, the exact mental image pictures, I can't believe I just used that term. But it was a picture in my head. And I'll never forget it. I don't think for the rest of my life I'm ever going to forget this. The exact moment when the full break happened, right?
Mm.
Was sitting in my room in Minnesota on my laptop, having read about a bunch of OSA stuff and then the OT3 stuff, and seeing in my head this chessboard. And I was a pawn on it.
Mm.
I was never the king. I was never a bishop. I was a pawn. And
Right.
L. Ron Hubbard and David Miscavige were the king and queen, right? And they were moving me my whole life. And it's like I sit here right now. I've gotten over an awful lot of that anger.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't know how to describe what word to use for it. I mean, rage doesn't even begin. I wasn't punching walls. I wasn't physically raging, but inside it was a total tornado. I mean, and that lasted for a long time. What about you?
To be perfectly honest, I just kind of didn't feel anything. I just wanted to move on and not really care about it. But at the same time, I kept watching content and I kept trying to figure out, I think, what was wrong with me and what I don't even know how to describe it. Like, my desire and my need to intake information about Scientology and the truth of it, is like, it's almost like an insatiable monster that needs more and more and more. But I never really felt much emotion towards it until kind of recently, when I've really been confronting and looking at what happened to me and putting these videos out. And that's when I started to get a little bit angry.
Yeah.
But I think the more the emotion is hurt. Like, I've been like, because people in Scientology, I know they're good people, and I was very close to a lot of them. But if I went to go talk to them now, they look at me as a pariah, or just they dismiss me. And it's something I'm guilty of as well. Like, I've dismissed people who have been suppressive before, or just like anti-Scientology in general.
Yeah.
That instant flip of the switch, where all of a sudden they mean nothing and they're bad, even though you have this huge history. Because that happened to me now, then funny enough, I feel hurt. And that's kind of the only way I can describe it.
Yeah.
But I am definitely getting a little more angry. I'm motivated though. If anyone who follows my channel, I've been working on my video editing and creating some shorts for YouTube, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. So, and then obviously back and forth between you and I is also great. So it is very motivating and gives me purpose in life. And that's the way I'm
Excellent.
looking at it, because I'm trying to look at it in a positive way.
That's the spirit. And there
Exactly.
is, and then seriously, there is a lot of good to come out of this. And the other thing about me 10 years ago and me now, of course, is that, there's been a lot of work done to come to understanding of things. And I'm not pissed anymore because I understand the situation, and I've had enough time and enough therapy, to be honest, that I've been able to talk it all through, right? And that's 10 years of my channel. I mean, and I'm sure you'll experience similar things as you go through this process. Is the emotions are not always obvious, and they're not always expected, and they happen when they happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I think this phase of finding out, this taking the time to learn about how they've been lying, I think that's important because I think we forget certain parts of our experiences. We sort of tuck them away, or they just fade from memory. But what doesn't fade from memory are the impressions, attitudes, and viewpoints that we carry from those experiences. Maybe we forget the experience, but the lesson carries on. And by taking apart the deceptions and by seeing how the deceptions work, not just the specifics of the lies, but how the lie factory produces lies in the first place.
Right.
You remember some of those earlier lessons, and you're able to sort of shed them more easily because there's a lot of things we carry around with us and we don't have any memory at all of where we picked it up. And when it's Scientology, when the source of it is Scientology, you kind of want to know that's where you got it from. So this review, this taking this time to do this work is, I don't think it's an option personally, but I know a lot of people do, or a lot of people don't want to go into that, or they think it's a really hard thing to do to read stuff or whatever. I get it. I mean, everybody's got their own barriers, and all of this is individual for each person. But I really just think that taking those things apart really helps bulldoze a lot of the bullshit that we're carrying with us from the cult mentality, as opposed to picking at it with toothpicks or something, if I use that analogy, right? By not learning. Then things go really slow. It's really hard to figure things out on your own. Sometimes you need somebody else's perspective or more educated perspective to go, oh, right, I didn't realize, and that kind of thing. And that's sort of what I'm encouraging with this step.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think, it is really important that people take that time to evaluate for themselves what they need, because everyone's different.
Yep.
And of course, conversations like this that we're having is purely a way to get some ideas and see how other people did it to see if it works for you, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And learning to appreciate. Here's a point from Scientology specifically, although other cults could apply this as well. Standard tech. This is laid into you, right? With an atomic branding iron, as Hubbard said, right?
Yeah.
So you've got this idea coming out of Scientology, and I had it hard. There is only one right way to do a thing. And every other way is wrong to one degree or another, because there's one most optimum, efficient way to do a thing.
Yeah.
You got to break yourself of dumbass ideas like that, right? Because that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's like not obvious ideas that come out of Scientology. And when you get a multiplicity of views about trauma and recovery and the cult beliefs and all of that, it gives you a variety, and variety is really where the sparks happen. If you're only getting one person's view of things, you'll be on the same track as them. And that's the whole thing with cults. That's what cults are all about, is one track. And Hubbard, of course, used the standard tech trope to reinforce that concept. And it's not a true concept at all. It's a trap, one of the many that are laid in. So that's why I think also the multiplicity of the viewpoints that you should get, read a lot of different people, watch a lot of different documentaries, read a lot of different books, and that will give you a more well-rounded approach to what's going to work for you in your recovery.
Yeah, you're no better way to put it, for sure.
Yeah.
And although I did start with your content, I've watched everybody.
Yeah.
I've watched every single documentary. Haven't read too many books because I'm not a big reader. Thanks a lot, Scientology. I think that kind of ruined me for reading. But it's really important just to get all the different viewpoints. And that's what's great about what's going on YouTube right now, whether you want to call it SPTV or if you want to just call it just the anti-Scientology movement or the Scientology truth movement, I should say, is there's something for everybody now.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Like if you don't get along with one person, you'll probably, connect with another person that's on there, and everyone's saying their own story, and it's really cool.
Exactly. I will say, of course, I want you to consume all my work. I want you to put me at the top of the list, but look at everybody,
Yeah.
No, that's just a joke. I'm just joking.
I don't think anybody could physically consume all the work you put out.
Oh my God,
in
no.
a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, it is a little ridiculous. I have put out a tremendous amount of work, but it's been a lot of recovery. That's why, Okay, so this next one, I think is actually really crucial. I get disagreement on this, and I understand, and I know some people are not necessarily ready yet, as they're in their progress out of a cult situation. Again, I think this is universally applicable, but it's lose the language. Right? Stop speaking the language. That's something you can do right away, and you'll be surprised at how hard it is to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You'll be surprised.
So on that point, then I'm curious because I don't disagree with you. However, I've had some conversations with a couple different people about language, specifically cult language and the power it has over you.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there is any value in taking control over the language, like using it when you want to, as opposed to when I guess you would have supposed to have been using it?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
some people don't agree with me on that either, where they think you should never ever say the words anymore, and they have power over you. My viewpoint on it is that if you use it in a way that you are controlling the language and using it to convey a point that you want to convey, I think it's powerful.
I do too. I say that you should have power of choice, and that's the place you want to get to. I would not ever put prescriptions down to anybody on this path of recovery of thou shalt and thou shalt not.
Right.
Because I think that would be silly and it lacks context. So rather than try to talk in those terms, I will say my reasoning for this is that it has to do with your brain and how we learn and how we unlearn. And when you've established years of behavior, and then you have neural pathways in your brain, right, that are well-trod roads that you go over it over and over and over and over and over again. And when you're indoctrinated in Scientology, there are certain concepts that are gone over and over and over, keeping Scientology working, auditing, word clearing, ethics, right? All the basics, all the stuff that everybody knows goes over and over and over again. And you end up with very precise ideas about how to interpret the world. And I don't want to get super complicated, but basically how you think has everything to do with how you see and hear and perceive the world.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not objectively receiving everything around you and taking it all in and then coming to objective conclusions about it. That ain't how this works. So the way you think affects how you perceive. So the faster that you can eschew or dump ideas like service facsimiles or overt motivator sequences or even the misunderstood word in all 10 of its definitions, right? The faster you can stop thinking that that's how you should perceive and interpret the world, the faster you'll stop thinking about things like service facsimiles and overt motivator sequences. And the faster you'll be able to stop immediately thinking, oh, you're sick, you must be PTS. Who's the SP? Like, these are just computations that happen immediately in a Scientologist's mind because of the habits that have been ingrained in there through the language. And Scientology specifically, like a lot of other cults, but really they go to town with this in Scientology, are thought-stopping cliches. Right? Thought terminating cliches. These little sayings, these little mantras, these little phrases we would have that shut down thinking. And we don't necessarily see them that way. Oh, he's PTS. We think we're labeling it. Oh, problem solved. He's PTS. No, that's a thought-stopping cliche. Now you're not thinking about it anymore.
Right.
And when you bring that out into the ex-Scientology world, that's a bad habit. You don't want to be thinking in thought-stopping cliches from L. Ron Hubbard. So the way to dump those is to stop thinking or using the term PTS, or potential trouble disorder. It's a fake construct. There's nothing real about it.
Yeah. So
the faster you can kind of dump that, the faster you're not thinking that way like a Scientologist anymore. And the technical, one of the technical terms here is it busts up your schemas, your sort of frameworks of thinking. And that's important. That's really important. Eventually, over time, it will happen anyway as you leave the Scientology world and enter and get acclimated, as we say, to the real world. Just like if you moved to another country and started picking up the language, you wouldn't be using English as much. You'd be kind of doing this half and half thing for a while, and then you'd be talking in the foreign language. It's kind of like that, but if you speed the process along by conscientiously not using the language and forcing yourself to come up with other other language expressions for these ideas, like a service facsimile. Don't call it don't say he's surfacking. Just say he's trying to be right. I
always hated that one.
Right, exactly. Right, because there's this whole package of assumptions and ideas that come with these words. When you say somebody committed an overt, it's not just he did a bad thing. It's this whole framework of ethics and overts and withholds and the overt motivator sequence and all this crap that comes with it, as opposed to just saying he did a bad. Yeah, he did a bad. He was a bad boy, that kind of thing. So I'm probably over explaining, but it's really, this is one of those ones I emphasize a lot. And after you kind of eschew it and get rid of it and aren't thinking about it that way anymore, then it's not so harmful, not so bad to go back and use those terms when you're trying to describe them to other people or talk about it with other, ex-members or something like that. And you're not really using the language the same way you did when you were in, you know what I mean? You're more lampooning or emphasizing the misuse of these words. And that's a healthier place to be with it.
Yeah. And I would say, so the SP chef here says, if you are able to use the words consciously, then it can be quite empowering. But if it happens without you thinking, like instinctively, then it holds power over you. And I think that is well said as well.
That's right. He summarized the whole thing right there. Well done, SP Chef. I just go on and on.
And SP Chef, thank you for watching. It's good to see you in the chat. Cool. So what's next on your list there?
Well, okay, so next thing on my list, this is great. We just opened this right before the show, and I went, hey, look at all these.
This is great. I threw all my notes to the side. We'll just talk about this.
No, this is great. But I really do. If anything I'm saying here parallels, your stuff or anything, please bring it in.
This is what I'm here for. I'm here to get your viewpoint on it and have a discussion. And I love what you're reading there. So let's keep
going. Okay, so my fourth point, and this was really, really big for me. I know it doesn't really hit with a lot of with everybody. but I really think, again, it's important is learn about critical thinking, science, and reason, because they're the polar opposite of Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's again, it's a variety of viewpoints, right? You don't necessarily have to agree with everything, but expose yourself to lots of viewpoints. And critical thinking is not about having a guru. It's about thinking through things in a disciplined way.
Yeah.
It's not natural to us. I have to make this point constantly, because I really want people to know it's not something you just stumble into. You have to learn how to do it. Because we didn't know how to do it, or if we thought we knew how to do it because we didn't do it, we ended up in Scientology. Every one of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even me, right? Even second gens. Like, there was a point where we kind of went, okay, yeah, I'm going to be on board now. And lacking critical thinking skills and the ability to parse information and understand fallacies and things like that, you don't have to memorize this stuff. You don't have to become a black belt in it. You know, there's just get some practice in it, learn some things about it, learn what skepticism is, what science really is, because all the bullshit Hubbard laid on us about science was nothing but bullshit. And I thought I understood a lot about science. I didn't know shit about science as a Scientologist. You know, stuff like that. Even though I'd had my head in lots of encyclopedias and lots of dictionaries, and I could give you a definition for physics, I didn't understand the scientific method. So how was I going to understand physics? You know,
Right.
Oh, and this was the other thing, is learning about these things also helped me focus my attention and purpose on something positive, because I was determined not to go from one cult to another. And by learning about critical thinking, I could objectively look at anything new with a critical eye, not buy into any supposed facts, right? Because that's important. And I really got to stress in this, because something I've learned since writing this book is it's not natural to us. There's no one who comes out as a little baby, right? Critically thinking. No one. I will literally say no one.
That could make a good cartoon, actually.
Yeah, it's true. Critical thinking baby. Because it would be a different world if we did. Because it's not a skill, you know. And the analogy I try to make is to martial arts, right? Nobody knows how to split boards, you know, or be a black belt. You gotta learn. You gotta discipline yourself. You have to practice it. It's the same thing with critical thinking. And I am at the head of the line of idiots on critical thinking. I'm really kind of saying it's a framework you can kind of align your thinking to, but it's something you'll be working on for the rest of your life.
Totally. You know, I will share probably the most important lesson I learned since leaving Scientology, and that is in critical thinking, the ability to take in what the information is, step away, and evaluate it, and then come back to make a decision.
That's
You
right.
can't do that in Scientology. Everything has to be done now.
That's right.
Give us money now. Buy this course now. Buy this auditing now. Buy the org now. Like, all these things have to be done now. There is no waiting, right? But it's so valuable to just be like, okay, I heard what you said. I'm going to go digest this for an hour or 2 or 3 days, however long it takes for me to figure out if this makes sense for me. And then I'm going to come back to you. And I find that's something that's super important. And I think I did not have when I left Scientology.
Yeah. So. Yeah, me neither. In fact, the whole world is kind of in a rush these days. Social media has kind of sped everything up and all that. And it really is a hard lesson that I had to learn over and over and over again. It's sort of been a progression of steps on it, of just slow down. Just slow down. There's no rush. There's no hurry. You got a lot of life ahead of you. Slow down, you know, because exactly for the reason you just said, right? Scientology is all about now, speed things up. Let's go. Always trying to take the time out of things, as we used to say, right? Like, how do we take the time out of this, right?
Yeah. Well, you're supposed to be able to control time, right? So
that's right. That's right.
If you if and actually an out point is added time on the evaluator's debug checklist, which is if you're trying to figure out what's going on with an area, it's a checklist you do, and one of them is called added time.
That's right.
So
it's crazy. It's and that's Hubbard, right? Because and it's a cult tactic, by the way. This is not just a Scientology thing.
yeah.
This is rife throughout cults. Is they want your constant attention on what they want you to have your attention on, right? Which is furthering and forwarding the purpose and goals of the cult, not you. And so if they can consume all of your attention in a sort of frantic fight or flight mode, that's where they want to kind of keep you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strategy. It's a strategic, premeditated thing. I just want to be clear about that. That's why the Sea Org is so fucking crazy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We never had a chance to think about what was going on around us because we were constantly being product officered for the next thing, right?
Yep. Good day, good times.
Exactly. Good times. So in other words, give yourself the time to think.
Yep.
You know, you deserve it.
Exactly.
And then it kind of goes along with what we were already going over a little bit here. Number 5, take the time to clean house in your head. Right? And this is broader than just Scientology stuff, because you'll find Scientology stuff has sort of spider webbed, insidiously kind of put itself into every part of your head, every part of your life. It's a totalist system. This is a term we use, right? It's a totalist system. It totally controls every aspect of your life. So you're going to dig up these cobwebs, these bits of Scientology all over the place in the internal house of your mind, right? And it can take a little bit of looking to reevaluate everything. You know, I mean, the two examples I give for people when I first got out, then these were big things for me to look into for myself. Other people will have other things for them. But for me, the two of the big things were my attitudes about LGBTQ.
Yeah.
And my attitude about psychiatry.
Yeah.
Right? Those were big things for me in Scientology. And when I got out, I was like, I see immediately that society doesn't seem to agree with Scientology on these 2 points. And they're not Scientology. They're kind of different. They're societal things. What should I be thinking about these things? Well, I can continue thinking that LGBTQ people are aberrated, psychotic, antisocial liars.
Yeah.
Or maybe I could listen to some of them. There's an idea, something I didn't do in Scientology because I was only listening to Hubbard, right? And same thing with psychiatry, right? Where you kind of find out it's not necessarily the horror show that Scientology presents. It's not necessarily the be all end all of existence either, but it does give us some.
But regardless, it's the difference is LRH Scientology it's black and white.
That's right.
And yes, there were abuses that happened in the past, and yes, there probably are some now in psychiatry and psychology, but that doesn't mean that's what the field is.
That's right.
That's the difference, and that's what I've had to, because as you know, and most of the people who watch my channel know, I grew up as the son of the executive director for the front group of Scientology that deals with psychiatry, CCHR.
Yep.
And so from a baby, I was inundated with this message of psychiatry is bad and psychology is bad, counselors are bad, public school is bad. The only reason that anything is bad in the world is because of this field.
That's right.
Not like in a joking way. This was dead serious. This is the reason that the world is so screwed, right? So getting over that has been a challenge.
Did you ever hear about FARSEC when you were in? I didn't hear about it till after I left.
You know, I have the sense that I did, but I don't remember specifically from where.
Okay. Yeah, I
never. It's very obscure information.
It's bizarre. It's so bizarre.
Yeah. So
okay, cool. Okay, now the next one, and we're at number 6 right now at a 9, so we're making great progress here. Number 6 is learn to re-experience emotion. This is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
This is huge, really big. In fact, probably one of the biggest. I won't say the biggest because I think again everybody's going to be different, but for me this was huge. What about you?
Oh, yeah. It's the biggest and is still the biggest. Alluding back to when I said that I didn't really feel anything when I left towards Scientology. That's because I can better now, but I couldn't feel.
Yeah.
And in fact, I for a long time I thought I was a psychopath because
Oh
I
wow.
had no feeling. Like I didn't like if someone would be crying on my shoulder or, despondent, I would have no emotion.
Right.
And
Right.
it's a disturbing feeling because when you're looking at all these other people crying, let's say at a funeral or something, and they're expressing their emotions, what's going on inside their head. And it's not that I didn't have the emotion, I just didn't know how to express it. And I
Mm.
didn't feel like I could.
Mhm.
Because if you do that when you're in Scientology, there's something wrong with you. There's an ethics issue. Or there's HENR, which is human emotion and reaction. And because you're on post, that's now case on post, which is a crime. And, you know, there's all these things that stop you from feeling. And so that dug pretty deep into me. And it's something that I feel to this day is something I have to work on.
And I would agree with you because it's to this day something I'm still working on.
Mm-hmm.
There have been many, many, many layers pulled off on this thing. This has been deep onion layer stuff for me, going all the way back to childhood, et cetera, right? And the emotional tone scale and Scientology's manipulation of emotional states is one of the, I will say, from my most professional point of view here, is one of the most powerful and mentally damaging things that Scientology does to you. Because the levels of control that are piled on to your emotional experience, the ability to display and feel your emotions, is it just piles one after another after another after another after another. And there are so many mechanisms in Scientology to reinforce this. No case on post, right? Human emotion and reaction. Literally, that phrase is a bad word in Scientology. Don't be HENRE,
Yep.
right? Don't have HENR. I don't want to see your HENR right now. Kind of crap, right?
You're triggering me, Chris. You're triggering me.
Right? It's like, I mean, don't be banky. I mean, shit, this goes all the way down to how children are raised in Scientology.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way back to the beginning for us, kids.
Stop dramatizing.
Yeah, stop dramatizing. That's
Yep.
right.
That's what
Oh
my
my,
mom used to tell me all the time when I would cry and want something really badly at the grocery store, and scream and kick and everything. She'd tell me to stop dramatizing and stop being banky.
that's right. Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to apologize for our stupid moms. It was, they were doing their best, but it's so false. It's so wrong.
Yeah.
Because what it lays in are suppressions of your emotional life.
Mm-hmm.
And sociality and manners and etiquette are all about learning the social mechanisms of how to not be out of control with your emotions, right? And how to be appropriate in the moment. And that's all you need. You don't have to go to the deep, deep level Scientology goes of the whole stop doing what you're doing, stop feeling what you're feeling. It's simply not okay. Right? It's not like in Scientology, it's not appropriate right now. It's not appropriate ever. You're
Unless
just
you're in session.
that, well, exactly, unless
Yeah.
you're in session. And
Yeah.
even
You
then,
are.
you can
Well,
get in.
even then, you're the way out is the way through, and you're ultimately you have to stop being emotional, or you have to be high toned for it to be okay and end the session.
That's the
So
point,
it's
right?
constant reinforcing that being sad, apathetic, angry, anything that isn't happy, cheerful, joyous, is wrong and bad. And it's something that needs to be fixed versus something that just needs to be experienced and embraced for a
That's
natural human emotion.
exactly. You
Yeah.
can't, I mean, did you ever feel guilty because you weren't VGIs at the end of a session?
Um,
I sure did.
no, I wouldn't say I felt guilty, but I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I'm
Yeah.
guilty, right? Like there's something wrong. I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah, you're broken somehow.
Yeah, for feeling the way I feel.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, totally.
That's the guilt trip. That's the thing that Scientology does to you, and they do it at every single level: public, staff, Sea Org. The only real difference is how tightly they tighten the thumb screws on you to get your emotions in check. But it exists at every level. What this leads to is so much social chaos, so much relationship disarray and confusion and communication problems. It doesn't just touch on your own internal emotional life, it touches greatly on how you treat others. And then Scientology goes so far, they don't just tell you or teach you and carefully control you to suppress your emotions, but then they teach you, especially in the Sea Org, oh, well, here's the times and here are the emotions that are appropriate for you to rip somebody's face off or give them a severe reality adjustment, or these other phrases we had. I was shocked to learn coming out of Scientology that severe reality adjustment is not a normal phrase that people use. I didn't know that. I thought that was a common thing.
Yeah.
People were like, what the hell is an SRA? I was like, you don't know? I'm giving that guy an SRA.
We need to give you an R factor, Chris, here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But you have to do that sometimes to people. As a Sea Org executive or Sea Org member, to the staff or to the staff to the public or whatever, you kind of have to. And I would watch some people who this is not their natural inclination at all. They're not the kind of person who wants to rip somebody's face off, but they're in a position where they feel it's their responsibility, and they have been trained and educated by L. Ron Hubbard and other Sea Org members that this is the proper way to deal with people. You have to impinge on their bank, right? You have to make the environment more dangerous than their reactive mind is. Did you ever read that reference?
Yeah. It's
Right.
and the funny thing too, like, because I went into some manager positions. I was running a team. I was about 22 under my direct control, and I had to watch that I didn't become a Scientologist executive in that time of managing these people, because if you treated actual employees of a real job like you would treat a Sea Org team or even a Scientology Class 5 org team, you would be thrown in front of a human rights tribunal so fast.
Yeah.
Like, it's not okay to yell at people, even if they're under your control in an environment, for work.
Exactly.
But the things that happen in a Sea Org or Class 5 org, like a managerial role, is completely inappropriate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Especially because the whole system of Scientology management relies on scapegoating people.
Mm.
It's not about finding whys, it's about finding whos, as Hubbard puts it, right? And the whys are always some asshole's fault. So it's always about the who, right? It's always, every time we would get an eval, and I was in management for years, right? So we had a lot of evals. I wrote evals, and it was always who's the who on this one, right? Like, that was the first thing you went for, because you wanted to see who was going to be getting busted, who was going to be getting in trouble for this, because somebody always got in trouble. It was never about solving the problem. It was about finding the scapegoat.
Yeah.
And that's the entire management structure or system of Scientology in a nutshell. I finally encapsulated something. So, so that's kind of an important thing to know coming out, right? That you've been carefully trained to be the most inefficient version of yourself as a manager, you know? and carefully trained in that. Hubbard didn't want competent people around him. He was he's just such an asshole. Okay, so number 7, learn about other destructive cults and mass movements and how they are similar to Scientology. Okay, this is really important because one thing drummed into your heart in Scientology is how unique and special it is, and how there's nothing else in the whole universe like it. And I'll never forget the day, again, one of those big milestone moments in recovery where it was like I was reading about Jim Jones from Guyana, right? The People's Temple.
Yep.
And everything that guy was doing, right? L. Ron Hubbard had done. And it suddenly was so clear, right? Like the light dawned, right? And this was years ago. Oh, there's a cult leader playbook. They all do this stuff. And that's when you realize, oh, right, it's actually, you can kind of reframe it in your mind that what you're looking at is a bunch of different cult leaders, L. Ron Hubbard, Jim Jones, David Koresh, Keith Raniere, all these guys. They're all doing the same things. They use slightly different language and slightly different techniques and, methodologies, but there's only so many ways to control people. And this is why this step is here, because it's really important to learn that what happened to you wasn't that unique or special or different, and you weren't a special snowflake in a special group with special beliefs. You got to kill all that, and it's a little bit along that you would do that. That's why it's number 7, not number 1. But I think it's a really important point to kind of kill all those delusions we had of how special we were. And with that comes some ego hits and some humbling moments, some like, okay, I'm going to have to embrace some humility right now because I was kind of a stupid jerk for a little while, but there's an acceptance in that. And it's not that you have to continue being a stupid jerk or whatever. It's a good thing to realize that, at least it was for me. So that's why I put that step in there.
Well, and I'll add on to that as well, that I think it's important that people recognize that there are other groups out there that are going to try and latch on to them after they leave a cult. So recognizing what the activities and the techniques are of cults stops you from joining another one right away, because that's the probably the worst thing you can do for your recovery is to just jump from cult to cult to cult to cult. And I think a lot of people do it, unfortunately, but that's because they've assumed that Scientology is the problem and not the actions of Scientology, right?
That's right.
Because Scientology doesn't matter as much as Catholicism or any other religion matters if you're just going by belief system. But if it's the actions that are being undertaken under the guise of help, that's the problem, right?
That's right.
If that makes sense. So you can easily jump onto other groups that are going to be destructive towards your mental health without realizing it if you don't educate yourself on the techniques they use.
That's right. That's exactly right. And the red flags to look for in those techniques, right? Exactly. How do you spot this early on? Because the thing about cults is, and I don't know, I mean, this is kind of obvious, but the outer layers of every single cult are very, very acceptable. They look great. They sound great. They feel great, all by design. So it's not always so easy to spot at the early points, but there's always red flags.
Yeah.
And if you know what to look for, you'll see them. And you'll see them earlier rather than later when you're lambasting yourself about why didn't I see it, right? If you educate yourself, you're ready, or you're more ready. We can always be fooled. Anybody can be fooled anytime. But and that's also another part of the point with recovery of this and all this learning that I'm recommending. I think we both are, is the humility that comes with that. It's sort of an assumption, maybe, and maybe I should say it out loud. Is there's a learning curve that has an end result of humility, not certainty. Like it's a little bit of a different approach to this. You're not in Scientology. We learned all this stuff, and we use this knowledge to feel more ego boosts, more better about ourselves, more certain of our life, right? And the fact of the matter is, life is a whole big bowl of uncertainty.
Yep. Yep. I mean, life is so full of changes. You cannot know where you're going to be tomorrow. You just can't.
Right.
Right. And for me, um, realizing that and just kind of learning to roll with the punches is that's my theory in life.
Well, exactly. Mine too. And Scientology is the exact opposite of that. And that's why it's instilling a mindset of control and certainty, right? It's the science of certainty. And they want you in the driver's seat. They want you in this delusional state where you're in charge of everything that happens to you. And that ain't life.
No.
Ever. And in fact, if you think the thought through, it doesn't even make any logical sense that you could be in the driver's seat in your life and be cause over life. I love all my air quotes today. Because because that takes away all your agency. If I'm the one who's fully cause here, what agency does that give you?
Yeah.
How is that supposed to make sense? It's this kind of logic trap, really. And embracing that uncertainty of life, not necessarily chaos. I'm not asking anybody to become an anarchist. I'm just saying, recognizing that certainty is an illusion and a sales job, and embracing the uncertainty of life and rolling with it and dealing with it as it comes. That's how it goes. That's how it's supposed to be.
Well, the problem with being certain is that if anything changes, then you can't change. You can't pivot.
Bingo.
Because it doesn't follow the path, and therefore it's wrong, and you start fighting against it. And sometimes you can't fight against it.
That's right.
Right? Sometimes you have to go this way, and then maybe you can come back to this way, but maybe you won't. Right?
That's right. That's right. And the problem becomes when a piece of data or belief becomes more real and more certain and more important to the person than the real world in front of them, right? Then they start acting crazy, because then they're just sitting there looking at this certainty rather than the real picture, the real world in front of them. And that's when Scientologists are staring at you, going, what are your crimes? What are your crimes? And you're like, what the hell are you talking about, right? That they don't make any sense, right? Because they're stuck with this fixed certainty that this is the way it is. You're a critic of Scientology, therefore you have crimes.
Exactly.
Period. End of story. End of conversation. The only answer you owe me is, what are your crimes?
Yep.
Doesn't fit, right?
Before I move on to the next step, I just want to address one comment in here. Awaken. Just want to let you know, I see your comment there. If you would like to chat, if you really are in Scientology and would like to discuss your current situation, you can reach out to myself. I am ptsforlife@gmail.com. There is a link in the description to reach out to me. I will 100% talk to you if you want to talk.
Yeah, me too. If you want to email me as well, I'm around.
Yep.
Good. Yeah. So that's the stuff, right? So kind of embracing uncertainty. It's a healthy place to go. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, like, I can't go into all the details right now, but starting this YouTube channel has completely changed the trajectory of my life, in ways that I never really thought that was going to happen. So it's pretty cool. And if I didn't have the decision in my mind to do what I need to do in the moment, I wouldn't have done this. I would have stuck to my path. And it's super important to keep your eyes open for opportunities, because big opportunities can come. That's my lesson for the day.
That's right. That's right. And that's that language thing too. Again, right? The more fixed you are in your thinking patterns, the less dynamic you can be and the less responsive you can be to the here and now.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's another way of putting that. Okay, I thought this was just kind of advice, really. This point, well, they all are kind of advice, I guess. But communicate with others who can and will understand your experiences and won't judge or be condescending. The reason I put that in is because sometimes we are abuse magnets, especially coming out of cult situations where we were in abusive situations all the time, and we become inured, we become used to it. So we can carry that bad habit forward into the real world and start looking for people, who have authority to us because they criticize us or because they put us down or something, because that's how things were in the cult. So seek out instead, do the exact opposite, right? Whatever was going on there, do the opposite. In this case, find people who are actually going to understand and not judge you for your bullshit, because we all have bullshit, all of us. And we all did stupid crap. And you don't need to be told you did stupid crap. You're already telling yourself that. That's why you're out. Yeah. You don't need people telling you that, right? And so kind of seek out people who aren't going to be that way to you, at least, especially at the beginning. But really kind of all the time. I mean, why do you have to have people telling you how stupid you were? There's no reason for that. I discourage it all the time in family and friends and everybody I've ever talked to or consulted with about this is don't sit there and judge them. One, it doesn't help. And two, it only either introverts or gets their defenses up.
Yep. Absolutely.
Either way, it's not where you want to go. So, but people have egos and they want to feel superior and they want to give you the I told you so's. And coming out of a cult, you're going to have some of that, right? If you have non-cult member family and friends, they're going to want to give you the what for, because there was all this time when they couldn't give you the what for because you didn't want to hear it. Just let them know it's not so helpful,
And what's funny? So as I'm thinking here, your point about people saying "I told you so," I like to try and look at things from a different perspective as much as I can, and I'm trying to think of myself if I were telling someone to stay out of a cult or a cultic group, and they weren't listening to me, I would get offended. And I would get defensive that my opinion didn't matter to them enough for them to listen to me. So I can really appreciate why someone would get angry about that and have it pent up.
Yeah.
And then finally, when you do leave, you're like, well, I told you so. And I've been telling you all along. Why didn't you listen to me? And, and get all this anger there. So I can really appreciate that.
Absolutely. They have feelings too. I mean, all your family and friends, the funny thing, this is always a funny observation to me for years now, is how PTS most Scientologists actually are, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
They're surrounded by family and friends who are rabidly antagonistic to Scientology. They just learn to shut the hell up because they can't tell the Scientologist. So once the guy comes out, they've exactly as you described, they have it all pent up, but it's not helpful. And it really needs to stay pent up for a little while until enough time has passed that the person is kind of over the situation. In an ideal world, I know it's not always going to work out that way, but as an ex-cult member, seek out understanding ears. That's all I'm saying, right?
Exactly.
And if you don't have them around you and your family and friends, go find some, because there are communities, there's Facebook groups, there's support groups. There is so much help out here in the big wide world for ex-cult members if they know where to look and if they're kind of smart about navigating their way through. And that's what this advice is all about, is trying to help in that navigation process. It's never easy for any of us. I hope that's clear, that this is never an easy route, and all of us are kind of figuring it out as we go. But hopefully these points will be lessons learned along the way that I think all of us can benefit from.
Absolutely. And look no further if you want to talk. There's two people here you're looking at right now and listening to who will 100% talk to you. And I know that Apostate Alex will talk to anybody as well. And it's just we're here. We're not doing this for financial gain. We're never going to get rich doing this.
That's
The
for sure.
purpose of these channels and this talking out is just to help people. So reach out and let us help you, because we will.
That's right. Big time. Big
Yeah.
time. All right. Well, the last one I have on my initial list was, most importantly, go out and live life to the fullest. And I think that that is absolutely a true thing. But I did want to throw one more iron in the fire, log on the fire here with this. That is something I've learned since this that I think is important enough to bring up today. And then maybe we wrap up, I guess.
Yeah. And we have a few questions to answer, but nothing too crazy.
Well, here's what I've got. And this is something we talked very briefly about before the show. This is based around Maslow's hierarchy. Okay. Obviously, it's kind of first and last, actually, because first on Maslow's hierarchy is your lowest level of physical basic needs, right? Do you have food? Do you have transport? Do you have shelter? Do you have a job? Do you have income? Things like that. Real base level stuff. Like you're not living and you're not going to survive if you don't have these things. So for me, first coming out of Scientology, and anybody first coming out of a cult who contacts me, the very first thing I ask them, unless it's clear it's already covered, is, do you have a food source? Do you have a job? Do you have a roof over your head? And do you have transportation? Those are your basics. And if you don't have those, there's no reason for us to be talking about loaded language and emotional suppression and all that. You got more basic things to be thinking about. I probably should have led with this, but this is really crucial. Yeah. So that's your lowest level of needs. Now, after that's all taken care of and your life is progressing and you're stable and kind of in charge of the factors of your own existence to one degree or another, right? There's coming up to learning about something really important that we all have, and that is the basis for how we got into a cult in the first place, and that is our emotions, our emotional needs. This is really an important topic, and you don't have to go all deep psych, master's degree stuff on this, okay? It's just, there are things in our lives, there are things about ourselves that that impel us or compel us or push us through life to do the things we do. Everybody's got different needs. We can categorize them into the same basic buckets, but they'll be different for every single person. Some people have an incredible driving need for community.
Yep.
Some people don't. They don't want to be around people, right? It's the introvert extrovert thing.
Yep.
Some people have a really deep need for meaning and purpose in their life. Some people don't. They're fine. They're aimless. They're wandering. That's what makes them happy, right? Different emotional needs, but we can categorize these into these different buckets. All of us have all these different categories in one degree or another. And the great thing about this is, I'm just going to say emotional needs. There's different models. There's different category lists. There's different ways of talking about this. I don't really care. I just want you to learn that these things exist. Because it was these emotional needs that you're carrying around with you that were preyed upon to get you to join the cult. And then stay in the cult. The reason you stayed and the reason you got in the first place was the cult was preying on your emotional needs. Community, family, purpose, meaning, ego, all of these are emotional needs. So I think the final step for me, at least, right, and today is this learning. And we've talked about learning about cults and learning about, diversive views and learning about this and that. I'm sorry, there's a lot of learning. But for me, this is really, this was for me at my stage in my recovery, this was a significant step. And this came after I got my degree and other things as I started twigging on this. It's helped me understand people and myself and the reason why we act the way we do in ways nothing else totally did. That's why I recommend it. Yeah. And then once you get that picture of yourself and your emotional life and your sort of emotional needs that drive you to do things, it's not so easy to prey upon them anymore.
Mm.
because you
Yeah.
recognize when somebody's trying to influence you with that, you know, because you recognize your own vulnerabilities at that point. Most people go through life thinking they're invulnerable. They're totally fine. Everything's great. It's everybody else who's all screwed up, right? They're fine. And, and I wish that was true, but it's not. You know, we're all kind of messed up, and we all have our needs, right? And it's competing needs that cause all the social friction. So it's a way of thinking about yourself. It's a way of thinking about the world. It's a way of looking at things. But I found it to be an incredibly clarifying one, and it's one that helps me to not be taken advantage of again, because I can recognize my own fallibilities. Right? You can appeal to certain emotions with me, or you can push certain buttons with me, and it will trigger me to do certain things. Right? We're all like that. We're all like that. More self-awareness of your emotional triggers and your emotional needs, and you will be armoring yourself against anyone manipulating you now or in the future.
Yeah.
So,
I think that is very profound and applicable not just to religion, but also to destructive relationships and controlling bosses,
that's
everything, you
that's right.
know? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
amazing.
our it cannot be overstated how manipulatable we are through our emotions.
Hmm.
Can't be overstated. You're not out thinking your emotions. It goes the other way around. Your emotions are the most powerful component of what's driving you. So building up critical thinking, exercising those frontal lobe muscles, and understanding your emotional life, your emotional needs. Man, you're untouchable if you got those two things down.
Yep.
That's what I got.
That's amazing. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
I knew there was a reason why I wanted to talk to you.
I love talking to you because I'm still learning. I'm still going with this, and all the things you said today have helped inform my understanding of this stuff even now. So thank you. Thanks for
That's awesome.
suggesting the show today.
And I mean, we'll 100% do this again, and we'll chat some more. I do have, so everyone does know, on Chris's channel, he has a podcast, and I'm going to be on it this weekend. Is that right, Chris?
Yes. Yeah, our interview is going up this weekend.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
that'll be cool. Take a look at that. Make sure to go over there and give it a good, deep listen. It was a really good conversation.
Yeah.
And you okay tackling just a few questions here and
Absolutely.
comments?
Bring 'em. Yeah, I'm not in any hurry. Let's do it.
Cool. Well, there was a super sticker, I believe. She says, "No, you are loved by many, many people, Jeff." And this is from Mary, who is one of my most lovely fans, I would say. I think she's on every single live stream that I do, and it's really lovely. Um, and of course, no one can ignore Tampa B Man, who seems to like redheads, and I'm okay with that. Alex had a good comment here. This has been such a good conversation. I'm enjoying every second of it. He needs more Chris and Jeff collabs.
No problem. I love collaborating. This is great for me. So
You know what would be really fun, though, I think, is if Alex joined us on a chat sometime. So we should
yes,
get that going soon.
agreed.
And Alex, thank you very much for the nice hot OT. Maybe cup OT? I don't know. You British people, I don't understand you sometimes. Um, there was a question up here.
Mhm.
I think this one here. Do you think LRH consciously built in safeguards like tell the lesser tale to leverage secrecy, keep people spending money, or was he just avoiding scrutiny of people smart enough to see the flaws?
Tell the lesser tale was an expression Hubbard used when he was talking about his own biography and his own life and the amazing, incredible things that happened to him and how he had to downplay his incredibleness his whole life. And I think that was just nothing but an ego trip, right, on his part, and a way to communicate his greatness by humble bragging.
Hmm.
That's what I kind of interpret that whole thing as. And yes, it does accomplish all of the things in your question, right? Because Hubbard's humble bragging contributes to this image that he so carefully cultivated in Scientology of this genius writer, philosopher, humanitarian who since the age of 3 wanted to save mankind, right? So, I mean, he slayed it on so thick. And so those kind of things are mental reinforcements for the believers so that they continue to love and worship and admire L. Ron Hubbard for the great being that he is, even if he won't, state his grandness and greatness, we can know how great and grand he is. I mean, this is cult leader 101 crap, right? So
what an overachiever he was.
yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Alex has a question for you.
Yeah.
Is there any explanation beyond just plain stupidity for Scientology's habit of kicking people out that want to stay and keeping people in who want to leave?
Yes.
Now, you can't answer stupidity.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is stupidity. There's a how do I put this? They want you to stay, but they don't want you asking any questions. And you just talk too much, I mean, you did, I did, like it's like it astounded me the first year I was out, 2013, when I was first getting out and then declared and everything. It astounded me how good they were at making their own enemies. Because they made an enemy out of me. I was cooperating. I was even doing my A to E. I was desperate to keep this thing that I had. And they blew it. They totally blew it. They declared me and they disconnected me, right? And had they not done that, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So they really do go it's noteworthy that they go so out of their way to make their own enemies. And this is actually, I've come to learn, because I've thought about this a bit and read about this, and this is a characteristic of cults. I mean, we call them destructive cults for a reason, and this is one of the things they do, is they just can't help themselves. The extremist mindset is a mindset of black and white thinking, and if you go into the gray, you're in that danger zone, and you have to be gotten rid of, because you can't have anything that's not absolute in that world, in that region, right, in that area. It bothers people. It makes them uncomfortable. And that's why they push us away rather than continue to use communication to deal with us and handle us, right, which they could have done. They don't, right? They didn't. And it never, and they, because they are very, as much as Scientologists and as much as other cult members and other groups pride themselves and tell themselves the story that they are the masters of communication, the masters of life itself, they're clearly not. And they actually have a shorter fuse than actual professionals in the real world who deal with people like psychologists, right? So what they think is this big feature they have that they're pumping themselves up on, Scientologists, right, with how good they can communicate and how ethical they are and all that. It's such a lie that even after we come out, we still kind of maintain that view for a while. Oh, we were so good at communicating. We were so good with ethics. We were so good with people. And it takes a while to, no, we weren't. We were bad at all of it. It was years after getting out of Scientology, totally kind of disrelated, but similar, that I realized what a shit job the Sea Org does in its renovations work. I thought when I was in the Sea Org, we were badass at our work, that we were producing high quality, Buckingham Palace level renovation work, right? I really thought that. And I was so up my own ass, on it, that I couldn't see we were producing crap and calling it gems and jewels of genius, right? So,
but you're doing it fast.
Oh, so fast. so fast, right? And that's why we were so much better than the wogs, right? So
What takes them? Why is it taking them so long to build this? We can do it in a day. Oh yeah, because we're doing a terrible job. Right. Never mind.
right. Exactly right. So I think it's same. To me, those dots connect. So that's my answer.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We had a good question here.
Ah,
Violet L. Chris, besides your book, of course, although your book does cover pretty much everything, what book do you recommend?
okay, so for every single ex-Scientologist, I got two books, right? First off, obviously mine, but A Piece of Blue Sky, John A. Tack.
Yeah.
It is the work. It's the work, and it's short. It's to the point. It's well documented. It's indexed. It's a great book. Can't recommend it enough.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, beyond the Scientology stuff, because that's all Scientology stuff. Let's take apart Scientology. Piece of Blue Sky, my book. Demon Haunted World by
Okay.
Carl Sagan.
Mm.
That was actually the first book I read coming out.
Oh, interesting.
Oh yeah, and it totally put my life on the course I'm on now with critical thinking and stuff. So
Mm.
the Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan Carl Sagan's not going to be your new guru, right? What he does is he puts you in charge. He gives you the baloney detection kit. That's
Mm.
a chapter in the book. It's called the baloney detection kit, right? How to spot bullshit, how to see the red flags. Like this was, you're going to love this stuff, right? That's a great book to read. It's also very short, really quick, really easy to get through. I'm due for a rereading of that book actually, because it's really set my life it put my head in a really different place where it made Scientology a lot easier to take apart. Put it
That's
that way.
awesome.
Yeah.
So there you go, Violet.
There you go.
Um,
Lots of other books after that, by the way, but I'll start with those.
Thank you, Kat, for the super sticker. And another question, I guess, from SP Chef. How hard has it been, if it isn't still happening, to get over the guilt to just do something for the sake of it because it is fun, it interests you, and not feel guilty because you are quote unquote wasting time?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I love wasting time. I can sit down on the couch with my dog and have a big old nap in the middle of the day, uh, any day that I want to. I don't actually have a problem with it. um, I don't know if it took me a lot to get over, but I enjoy loafing. So I always felt like I didn't have time to do it before, yet I wanted to do it. So now I have time to do it. What about
That's
you,
right.
Chris?
Yeah, I took years. It took me a really long time to get over this, and it was in stages. I'm pretty good now. Now I don't have, I've always got a lot to do, and I've come to learn in my recovery that my personality is just kind of go go go.
Hmm.
That's just kind of who I am. That's not a Scientology thing. Scientology just made it worse. So the idea of not wasting time and that kind of thing, I totally get where you're coming from, right? But I have so much more power of choice over it now. I had for many years, it was that Sea Org voice in my head. Stop slacking. You're slacker. You're a slacker, right? That whole thing. I could literally hear it in my head. So it took a long time. And actually, what helped with this, I didn't include it in my list of things, but maybe especially for ex-Scientologists and certainly for ex-Sea Org members, practice loafing. Just give it to yourself, and then you might sit there on the couch feeling a little guilty or whatever. Just laugh at yourself. Just nap. Nap. I got this time, and it's mine, baby. Play video games, watch movies, read comic books, do fucking nothing, and revel in it, and that will help balance the scale a bit. At least it did for me.
Take
And
a 1 hour lunch.
yeah, exactly. Take 2 hours. Really go all out, right?
Yeah, if you really want to be idle, take an hour lunch.
Yeah. but actually set like I didn't schedule my free time. I wasn't that stupid, right? But it was like, but I really did have to practice
Right.
enjoying it for a little while because it didn't come super easy to start with.
There you go. Cool. Well, thank you very much, SP Chef.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here. Oh, here's a good one. This is for both of us. Kelly BC. Jeff, I know you have said that you have not received any fair games so far. Is that still the case? As far as I know, it's still the case. And Chris, have you had to deal with any? Because that's an interesting thought. I was thinking about this actually the other day. When you see a lot of people will advertise their fair game, but I don't recall really seeing much in regards to you as far as fair game. And you're so prolific that you must have had some experience with someone outside your house digging through your trash or something like that.
Well, yes and no. Here's what I've had, and I'll give you a whole rundown on it because it's really not much. And I'm very happy about that. I want to be super clear. I'm not in this to get fair gamed. I think that would be an incredible bother, and I wouldn't enjoy any part of that, right? And I'd film it and I'd show it and I'd tell you guys about it if there were people parked outside my house or going through my trash or something. I've not had that level, at least not that I know of. What I have had, and what still is out there, right, is a hate website about me on the Aftermath page or Aftermath site. There's a page about me with a video from my ex-wife when I was in the Sea Org, totally trashing me, and a whole bunch of nonsense and exaggerated stuff, and really kind of weird, out of context stuff that they sort of frame together as a narrative of why I'm a bad person. And I've already gone on my channel, explained the truth of all that, so it's no big deal. But it was, but that's kind of out there, that exists, and I get really, really weird communications sometimes, and I've had people mess with me digitally, right? You get I don't know if if some of these things are just trolls out there or if it's Scientology, right? When you find yourself getting subscribed in 3 days to like 3,000 subscription services and stuff like that. You're sitting there unsubscribing for a few weeks, this kind of crap. I don't, you can't point to Scientology and go, well, they're the only ones doing that. But it does feel a little personal sometimes. Sure. I have had an offer to buy my YouTube channel.
I remember that now.
Yep. That was interesting. They lowballed the shit out of me, though. So I was like, yeah, I don't think so. Like, I'm going to consider selling my YouTube channel for less than $5 million, right? At least set me up for life,
Dude, yeah. Hey, Osa, if you want to buy my YouTube channel,
right?
$5 million.
This was after a few years I was on too, right? So I had quite a bit of content. I was like, man, my freedom of speech is not that cheap. Doesn't come that cheap. And let's see. I have I've had personal contacts come into my vicinity through social media and once or twice in person over the years that have been very suspect. And knowing everything I know about all the dirty deeds that Osa gets up to, I am in a constant state, even to this day, of always second guessing everything when it comes to social contacts and new people coming into my life and opportunities presented to me and things like that. I always have to be wary. It's not paranoia. OSA is a real thing. They really exist and they really do write their programs and they really do try to mess with people. So I always have to temper my life through that lens, that reality. But fortunately, because I've prepped everything so well and because all my people kind of know my situation and I work for myself, I'm not reliant on another person for, my job or something like that. I've managed to avoid a lot of the leverage points that people usually have when it comes to fair gaming. So far it's been pretty light for me. And that's been, like I said, I'm more than happy about that because it just gives me more time and more freedom to get my work done.
Yeah, exactly. And to be perfectly honest, like, I suspect something will happen at some point, and I really don't care. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and usually what Scientology will do is try and dig up dirt on you and then publish it for the world. The funny thing is, when I was in Scientology and growing up in, my 20s and so forth, I wasn't a perfect person and I made some mistakes. But that was all in Scientology. And now that I'm out of Scientology, I have a very ethical, happy, productive life with amazing people who care for me. And I owe that all to not being in Scientology. So it's kind of like if they dig up dirt on me from when I was in there and confess to things and publish it, well, I was a Scientologist then. So just keep that in mind.
Exactly.
You
Well,
know?
of course, and the other thing to keep in mind with all of this crap is they're going to lie no matter how they do it.
Yeah,
They can't,
exactly.
they can't help it, right?
Yeah.
So no matter what's going to come out on you, it's going to be bullshit, and it's just what they do. It's and the other thing about this, and I don't necessarily laugh and giggle at fair gaming. I don't. It's a very serious thing, and it can really mess with people.
Yeah.
Masterson's victims, Leah, Mike, Tony. I mean, these are people who have really experienced Scientology's bullshit
Yes.
for an extended period of time, and I would not want any part of that. So I definitely, appreciate what the Church of Scientology can do when they decide to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to me how over the years those efforts by them to do what they do only actually in the public eye and in the world's eyes, it really only helps you.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm really being blunt, right? My Twitter followers 3x'd after that hate website came out on me. My YouTube channel grew by 10,000 people in about 2 weeks from that fair gaming, which followed immediately after me being on Scientology in the Aftermath for the first time.
Right.
So that helped too, right? But it wasn't like they flashed my YouTube channel on the screen, right? People had to find me. So Scientology just made it easier for them. And so in a way, you know what I mean? Like all their efforts, all the money they spend, all the bullshit they do, they're only shooting themselves in the foot.
Oh, it's what they're best at.
Oh yeah, flat out. Flat out. So I'm not inviting any of this bullshit because I don't want it in my life, but fuck off, Scientology.
Yeah, Scientology do fuck off, as Alex and his friend there, John Sweeney says. Oh yeah, and I would like to. I think we're gonna wrap up. We're passing 2 hours here, which is a little bit longer than I thought we were gonna chat. But
Cool.
I mean, it's been great. Tell you what, check out Alex's channel, Apostate Alex, because he released a video, Go Power Thetans, and it's hilarious. So you should check it out. It's just a quick short, but it's a music video that he made, and it's amazing.
That's right.
Cool. Yes. So, Chris, is there anything you would like to say before we end this interview?
Well, this was a great session. Is my needle floating?
Right.
Yeah, no, this was fun. I did enjoy this. And thank you for inviting me to do this. I really, really, really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Well, I did too. And I think everybody in the chat did. It was very active and it was really fun. Chris, how can the viewers support you and your channel?
Well, funny you should ask. Patreon, PayPal, Venmo, buy me a coffee. I've got all the things activated. And if you go to my channel and you look up any video I have, all the links to all of it is in the descriptions of every one of my videos as far as supporting my channel. The other thing that I'm working on right now is I'm putting an Ideal Studio list together, or I've got it together on Amazon. So if you want to support my work through that, then you can help me build the Ideal Studio here, right? I'm working on a few things with that. And otherwise, just find me through YouTube, through my podcast, and through my book, which you can get on Amazon.
Awesome. And for myself, definitely, if you would like to support my channel, the best way is, of course, liking and subscribing, as well as watching more of my videos. That really helps push get the algorithm going and pushing my content to other people. I would love to reach my next milestone of 5,000 subscribers. I'm a little bit ways off now, but with your help, I can. If you would like to help me out financially so I can keep doing this and creating more and more videos and shorts and do some editing work, you can buy me a coffee. Link is in the description. And yeah, other than that, just keep watching. And that's kind of all I need from you guys. All right, man. Well, we will see you soon. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Bye bye, everybody.